Welcome to the most important podcast ever. And I'm thrilled with our guest today, Susan Berard. I first met Susan in Columbus, Ohio, many years ago, more years than I care to mention, although they don't seem to have affected her in quite the same way. I Susan has an interesting place in my heart. Susan was the toughest recruit I think I we ever had in trying to get someone to join our team. But as I got to know Susan and really understand the many facets of her personality and what she brought to leadership and to life, I have deep admiration for her. And that's why I was so grateful to have you on today, Susan. Maybe you could take a second to introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. My name's Susan Berard. I live in Montana with my husband, three very large dogs, and two barn cats. I worked in consumer electronics for over 25 years, and for the past 8 years, I've been working here in Montana as a pro bono portrait photographer, primarily on the Crow Reservation, which is a Native American tribe here in Montana.
I Susan, when I first met Susan, she was managing an Incredible Universe store in Columbus, Ohio. And as an absolute devotee to consumer electronics, it was an amazing place, just an amazing place. And Susan had it running like a Swiss watch. So naturally, I wanted to hire her. And she made me work very hard to make that happen. And I'm going to admit, I'm a little jealous about the Montana address and the life you have there, and I want to hear all about that. I'm wondering if you could start us off with just a little flavor for your retail career and some of the lessons learned, and then we'll talk a bit about the transition and to your new life.
Sure. I started in consumer electronics in 1987 at a little small mom and pop retailer called Sun TV. And I started as a commission salesperson. And, back in the day, uh, those days we had video cameras that probably weighed 20 pounds and were two pieces. One piece hung over your shoulder, the other piece sat on your shoulder, and there was beta and VHS. So I'm really dating myself old school, but I fell in love with the product, and I fell in love with all aspects of later computers, cameras, and all of the well, maybe not so much the appliances, but I really enjoyed the products. I went from Sun TV to Incredible Universe. uh, Before I left Sun TV, I was the first woman that was promoted at that store. In fact, on my first day, I'll never forget it. A lady told me that was training me, "Honey, we don't promote women here." So, then I made it my goal to
Right.
be I was. And I left Sun TV in 94 and went to Incredible Universe. And I loved it. It was a great place. The people were amazing. It was huge. It was 300,000 square feet. Or no, I'm sorry, 150,000 square feet and 300 employees working there. And that was probably the downfall of that too. But I really enjoyed working in Incredible Universe, but my home was Best Buy, and I loved working in Best Buy. Brian, I came to Best Buy because of you, and that's not you and Sean Score, and people is what makes all the difference. Brian was complimentary of the people I was interviewing with. I was talking to a couple of the competitors in retail, and he said they're good companies, but here's why you need to come to Best Buy. And he was right. The other two actually are went out of business, and Best Buy still remains strong today. And I did a lot of things with Best Buy. I started out as a trainer. I went into human resources, and my favorite job actually was running a store. I loved being a general manager, and I did that in Naples, Florida, in Leesburg, Virginia, and Martinsburg, West Virginia.
It's so interesting that you say that. My favorite job that I ever had was managing a Best Buy store. It's
Mhm.
very hard to replace the intimacy of day to day working with a team and watching uh, them achieve their goals and
Yeah,
collectively the team achieving their goals. I've never really felt anything that matched that.
I agree 100%. In the FaceTime with the customers and just watching people grow, there's nothing like it.
It's really what drove the idea, the genesis of this podcast, is having gotten to know so many people over the years that I worked with in the amazing stories and things that they've gone on to do. It just energizes me so much. And I told you I'm very jealous about you living in Montana. It's a place I aspire. I'm going to come out and visit you, and I want to visit the Crows. We're going to talk about that, and I want to talk about your work too, because in getting ready for this, I went back and looked through. Your work is really amazing. I mean, your pictures. I'm going to need to talk to you about purchasing one for my lake home. I just love your work. Um, Anyway, back to the point. So, the things that you did in your professional journey before you made the big move, is there something that stands out or a turning point moment for you that led you to change or sort of um, brought you down to come up like a phoenix rising?
Yeah, actually, this goes back to a long time ago when I was 18 years old and going to the University of Toledo. I was working in a fast food restaurant, and I actually was a victim of a shooting in the restaurant. I was shot in the chest. I lost my left lung, and I remember it, even though it was a long time ago. I remember like it yesterday. Um, and the this I had to go through surgery, and they told my parents they didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And I remember before I was in and out of consciousness, but I remember before I went in for the surgery, they let my parents and my pastor see me, and I'm like, wow, I didn't communicate, but I remember thinking, wow, this must be pretty serious. I wonder if I'm going to die here. And it was serious. The bullet nicked the pulmonary artery of my heart, so all the blood was going through internal bleeding. And I remember waking up on life support a couple days later, and my older brother Michael kissed me on the cheek. Now that had never happened in my life. I mean, that just had never happened. So I knew how serious it was, but because I was on a ventilator and total life support, I didn't. And I was in and out of consciousness. They didn't know if I was going to be brain dead or not because they lost me on the table a couple of times. And I desperately wanted to communicate when I did wake up a few days after that. And they handed me a pencil, and I remember writing, "I quit. I don't want to work at Burger King anymore." And so they knew that I wasn't brain dead, even though my brother still questions my mental acuity. So I did recover. But what inspired me to have a full on passion for life and joy for life, I really think I can carry that with me because I did have some knowledge that how serious my injuries were, and I was given this amazing gift of life. It also led to kind of a downfall for me because it was many years later in 2016. There were a number. I was managing the store in Martinsburg, West Virginia, the Best Buy store there, and it was probably my favorite store I ever managed, even though my Naples store went to top in the company. But it was my favorite because of the people were so nice, the customers were so great, and the employees were the best ever. And there were a series of armed robberies going on. And one night I was closing, and some men came to the door, approached the door, and they had guns. And it, I had complete PTSD shut down. And so I actually that was the end of my Best Buy career because I just couldn't go back because I started seeing guns everywhere, and I realized that I never dealt with the trauma professionally, never dealt with the trauma of being shot. and the shooting was a robbery, and the guys that I was working with jumped the man that shot me, but he looked me in the eyes and lifted the gun and shot me in the chest. And I think that, I after now it's been about 8 9 years since I left retail. I feel I'm in a much better place now, but that was probably the pivotal moment that really changed my passion for life.
That's an amazing. First of all, what a horrific story, and to come across two traumatic events like that, the odds are infinitesimal, and it must have been just so difficult to go back after. I'm in awe of your remarkable retail career coming back from the shooting at Burger King. I mean, that's just, was it
Well,
difficult to go back into a public setting and work with the public again?
thank you. I truly loved every job I ever had, but again, I can't, and I'm not here to um, promote Best Buy, but I still shop there, and I still tell everybody to shop there because it's such a great company. And um, you know, I had a love for it. I had a passion for it, and I miss it. And I believe it or not, I dream about it often. I don't know if that happens to everybody that leaves retail life, but I still am running swords in my sleep.
And my point with this podcast isn't about the companies, it's about the people. I just met so many remarkable people in my years at Best Buy. So there's a Best Buy centric nature to it, I suppose. I'm so curious how you go from a very successful retail career. I mean, Susan, you were one of the best GMs I ever worked with, ever.
Oh, thank you,
And
bud.
besides being a person in my top tier of people I admire, for real.
Thank you.
And all of a sudden, you make this move, and I lose track of you after I separated from Best Buy. And the next thing I know, you're in Montana. I'd love to sort of hear that story. So you brought us to the point where you had the reaction, completely understandable, to another uh, potential robbers at the store, and then you make the move from that trauma to Montana. I want to hear about it.
Sure. So when I first moved to Montana in 2016, uh, it was because my husband had a vacation home here. He went to the University of Montana and he fell in love with Montana. But he's a CPA, and there was not the money that you can make back east. So he grew up in Washington, D.C. He has 4 children, and they were in that area. But we made the decision to move there full time because where we were living in Loudoun County, Virginia, has the same number of people for the entire state of Montana. And it was very hard for me to do peopling at that point in my life. And so um, we moved here full time. He works remotely, so it wasn't a problem. Um, and I can tell you a little bit about how I connected with the Crow tribe too, but that's how we ended up in Montana. It was a vacation home that I fell in love with Montana the first time I set foot in this state. All the stress just melts right off of you.
That's how I feel about Alexandria. Getting out, even a couple hours out of the city, there's a much stronger feeling of community and everything else. I just love it. But I do have huge Montana envy. I really, really do. And I would love if you could talk a bit about your art and how you connect with the Crow tribe and what you do.
Great, thank you. Well, so when we first moved to Montana, we wanted to find a church where we belonged and felt welcomed. And we had found one in Red Lodge, Montana, which is probably about a half an hour drive, 45-minute drive from our off grid home. And but the pastor retired, and the new pastor wasn't as engaging. So we tried a couple other churches, and we were like, well, let's try this one on in Pryor, Montana, on the Crow reservation. And David, my husband, has a little bit of Native American blood from his great grandmother, and he wanted to check it out, and so we did check it out. And the second we walked in, it was magical. We felt accepted and welcomed there, even though we were probably maybe one of four white people in the church. We still felt totally at home. And then after church every Sunday, there was coffee and donuts or food, and people would sit around and just share these amazing stories. And this fellowship really started to create some strong friendships and bonds with the people. And so on Christmas Eve one year, the first year, my husband said, "Why don't you take pictures of?" Because everybody dresses up for Christmas Eve, and so we went to Christmas Eve mass, and I took photographs, and the people loved the pictures so much because they'd never had that before professionally, and I started doing that for all of the events for the church. And the about a year and a half, 2 years later, on Christmas Eve, I was adopted as a sister to Carol Goodluck and Janice Whiteman and Geneva Whiteman. And what that means is not that I'm a tribal member, but I'm a family member in the tribe. We have a clan called Whistling Water. So I named my photography Whistling Water Photography. That same year, November, my husband was adopted by JR Goes Ahead as a brother. And that's another family. And his clan is Ties the Bundle. There's 10 clans in the Crow tribe, and basically it means you're just a whole group of extended family. So I'm a child of Whistling Water and Ties the Bundle with my sister Carol. And one of the most significant things I've learned from the Crow is how to include God in your daily life in all matters. They're the most spiritual people I've ever met. And I knew nothing about Native Americans. I grew up in farm country in Ohio, and everybody was white there. And so I was just thirsty to learn about these cultures and the traditions. And um, there's rituals that they do, like saging, which is cleansing by burning sweetgrass or cedar. And with that, the smoke carries away all your negative energy, thoughts, and emotions, and it promotes spiritual balance. So, being a sister to Carol and Janice has been one of the most rewarding events in my life, and the most humbling, because I'm so blessed and honored to have not just one Native American family, but two with the Goes Ahead family too. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Crow Fair, because along with that, there's this huge powwow. So I'll pause for a second, see if you have any questions on that first part.
I'm dying to hear about that. I have just one question. And man, do I want to get out and visit you and experience that because it sounds amazing to me. Have you found more differences or similarities as you've met and become close with members of the Crow tribe and people you knew in your prior life?
I think similarities. We're all people, and they have huge hearts, and the people that I've interacted with are loving and kind, and we're all just people, but the stories that they have are so dramatically different than the upbringing that I had and the stories that I have. There's a lot of tragedies on the res, and and but there's also so much love and so much spirituality, more than I've ever had in my entire life. So I think that, to answer that, people are more similar than you would think different, but their stories are amazing.
I I am going to leave this podcast and want to read and learn as much as I can about that. So if there's anything you think I should read, if you'd send me a note, I'd really appreciate it because I am fascinated by the indigenous people culture and how they've carried forward through some really difficult histories.
Yeah, and it's not in the, like, the very distant past. JR Goes Ahead was the tribal chairman. They don't have chiefs anymore. They have the tribal chairman. He was
Right.
tribal chairman for a little while, which meant he was in charge of the Crow tribe. His grandparents were in boarding schools where the white people cut their hair, told them they couldn't speak their language, they couldn't wear their regalia, and they were sent away. They were separated from their parents, and that was, as recently as 2 generations ago. So it's really interesting and tragic, and it doesn't have to define who they are now.
Yeah. Just like the very difficult things that happen to you don't define who you are today.
Yeah. And I think another thing is, Brian, is we're never too old to learn. And um, I don't consider myself a professional photographer. I do my best every day. And I put a secret ingredient in all of my work, and that's love. And that's, just I get true joy. And so I do this work for free. I'll drive wherever, probably, usually it's an hour drive each way or hour and a half each way, and dedicate my time to taking the photos and editing them. And I get more out of it than they ever get. And so what happened was they started asking me to take pictures of their graduations, and take pictures of the families, the babies when they come, the baptisms. And so and it's hard for me to say no. It's almost impossible for me to say no. The answer is going to always be yes. And then they say, "What can I pay you?" Um, Once in a while, I'll tell them to bring me some fry bread, but you can't eat too much of that either. So there is a huge powwow in Crow Agency, Montana. It's on the land surrounding the Little Bighorn River where the Battle of the Bighorn was. It's the third week of August every year, and all tribes are welcome. The Crow people are the hosts. And so it's one of the biggest powwows in the country. It is the biggest powwow in the state of Montana. And for the Crow people and for my Crow family, it's really a huge family reunion. All of the people take time off work and set up a teepee. More than 1,500 teepees are set up, and it's full. The Crow Fair is full of parades and dancing, drum music into the wee hours of the night. It's amazing to go to sleep in a teepee listening to the Native American drums, and dancing competitions and a rodeo. And it's been going on for over 100 years. And
Wow.
we have had the honor of camping with my husband's family and seeing the Crow Fair from an insider perspective. So visitors, anybody can come to the Crow Fair, but we stay there for a whole week. We come a couple days ahead. You set up your camp, and we stay for a couple days after. We have about 40 family members that camp on our site, and we cook traditional dishes and non-traditional dishes too. We all take turns feeding the family, and we do something called a clan feed for our extended family, where there's 50 to 100 people that'll come buffet style. In the daytime, when there's not activities like dancing or rodeo, the elders will sit around and tell stories about their childhoods or traditions, and teach the family members. Much of the Crow culture is passed down through word of mouth. And they talk about, family members who have passed, and just sit around and enjoy life in the company of each other. And one of the most significant moments of my life in 2021, my sister-in-law, Abby Goes Ahead, actually made a dress for me, a Native American regalia dress. She made handmade and hand beaded moccasins for me. And on the day of honor, which is after all the visitors have gone home and it's only the Crow people, they do an honor dance, and it's a whole day of dancing. And you have to, whether it's 100 degrees or 20 degrees, you have to stay with it the whole time. You go from one station to the next. They dressed me up, braided my hair, um, and it was one of the most spiritual days and one of the highest honors I've ever had in my life. It's not cultural appropriation when your sister-in-law who's Native American dresses you, makes the clothing for you and dresses you. And all of the other people, regardless of whether they're Cheyenne or another tribe or another race, when they get dressed up, they all tell me the same thing. It's one of the highest honors of their life.
That's amazing and very moving to me. And I don't think it's cultural appropriation at all. I think it is an amazing honor that they've brought you into their family. And you know what I'd love to do, Susan, as we get closer to Crow Fair, maybe we could get you back on and let's just do a show dedicated to that and talking about some of the highlights and why people should get out there and check it out.
I'd love to, and I'd like to bring my sister Carol too. She has so many great stories, and she's a lovely woman.
I would do that anytime with the two of you. I think that would be amazing, and I would be honored. And I just want to, and I'm burning up a lot of your time, I know, but I just want to say, you, I think you're right. We're never too old to learn. I think when we stop learning, we start dying. It starts
Yeah.
to end. And I think that the whole thing is to stay intellectually curious and to feed this thing. And I'll tell you something else that I've noticed. I bet I have looked over the years at 150 of your pictures that you've posted. And the thing that radiates, and I didn't have the word for it until you just talked about this, the thing that radiates through every one of those pictures is love on both sides of the camera. And you see the pride of the Crow people, and you see love and them trusting in your camera lens. It's just really beautiful. So one of the things I want to do is put a link on this, and I will to your site so people can get a look at your work because I think it's really quite remarkable and a beautiful tribute to the Crow people.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And I always like to close on a lighter note if you remember any meetings we were in together. So I'd love to ask you, what's the most unusual job you've ever had, Susan?
So, I thought about that, and I really haven't had too many unusual jobs, but I will tell you the most unusual thing that I've ever done is I became a beekeeper. Our home in Carbon County, Montana, is off the grid, and we've moved from there since then. But you and I have shared. I've seen wolves, I've seen grizzly bear, moose, elk, antelope. I wanted to have bees. I don't know why. I have no idea what drove me to do that. And I fell in love with beekeeping, and we had a pretty significant wildfire in 2021 that I'll share with that in some other future. We didn't lose the house, but we lost all the vegetation the around the home, and so it wouldn't sustain the bees. So I donated all my beekeeping things to the local school that was about 20 miles away, and they're keeping bees now at the school, which is pretty cool.
That's really cool. And I am so uh, obsessed, as I think you know, with wildlife. Every vacation I do tends to center around experiencing wildlife in their natural habitats. Um, so I definitely have a visit to Montana in my future.
Good,
I want. I'm sorry.
good. We'll put you in a teepee if you come during Crow Fair.
I would be honored beyond words. I want you to know you're always been someone I admire, and that admiration has just grown over the years. And my heart is full of love for you and your journey. And from the bottom of my heart, Susan, I want to thank you for being here today. And it's so fitting on International Women's Day that you're here with us. So nothing but love to you and your husband and your whole um, pack of animals. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.
so much for tuning in to the most important podcast ever. And please look for us on all the places you find your podcasts, and look for us at the most important podcast ever on YouTube. And we will talk to you soon. Thank you.